Hello and welcome to the show. My name is John Christian. My guest today is self-published author Richard Graves. He has written a book called The Question of Evil, a Practical Theodicy for the 21st Century. I think we should pay attention to this one, so stay tuned. Hello, Richard. Welcome to the show.
Good evening. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. I understand you've written several books, but the one we're going to talk about tonight is The Question of Evil. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, The Question of Evil is a practical theodicy for the 21st century. I don't know if people are familiar with the term theodicy, but a theodicy basically is a defense of the position of belief in God and arguing a philosophical question about the existence of God. So there have been many philosophers throughout history and theologians who have written theodicies. This one is a practical one for the 21st century because we deal with a particular type of postmodernist type of what I call, or what is called officially, the new atheism. This movement, I guess, started in the early 2000s. And again, their ultimate objective is their presupposition is that if you remove belief in God and thereby remove religion, then everything in society will be right and everybody will be a rational human being. And that, of course, flies directly in opposition to the face of what we've seen happen in the 20th century, from Adolf Hitler to Joseph Stalin to Mao to Pol Pot, different regimes that were in some cases communist, but in all cases authoritarian. And these were absent belief in deity. I won't say absent religion because I don't believe one of the presuppositions I talk about in the book is the fact that you can have atheism and still have religion. So, for example, with the Soviet Union and Joseph Stalin, you have a personality cult where, Joseph Stalin, and maybe you can even argue the Communist Party, takes the position of deity, and the religion forms around that. And I know there are a lot of atheists who will be rather argumentative about that. The idea of religion being you being an atheist and still having a religion. They'll argue that the definition of atheism is simply the lack of belief of a deity or deities in general. However, yes, you can have a lack of belief in deity, but you can still have religion. And as I was stating, other things take the place of deity, be it worship of an idea, be it worship of an individual, be it worship of the earth, various things. So, the argument often by the new atheists is that religion is the cause of all the war and all the evil things that we have. And they make no distinction between a member of Al Qaeda and Mother Teresa. They will look at them both as being religious extremists, and I find that argument, basically intellectually lazy, but it's an argument nonetheless. So the occasion of me writing the book, I'm actually a fan of Neil deGrasse Tyson's. I'm, oddly, even though I'm a theologian and philosopher, I actually, enjoy science. I enjoy physics, astrophysics, particularly, fascinated by the universe. And, I know the argument from the those of the atheist persuasion regarding science is that if you believe in science or if you understand science, that means you should automatically reject all things deity. And that if you understand the workings of the universe, or you understand anything about physics or astrophysics, it points to you to have I guess what they're saying is that if you believe in science and you believe in scientific theory, like the theory of evolution or other cosmological theories, that if you believe those things or if you follow those things, that you by definition should not believe in God. But oddly, those things to me point me more in direction of believing that there is an actual God. So I guess you can have the same, understand the same things and believe the same things and come to very different conclusions, I guess. So yeah, that was the occasion of writing. I was actually following Neil deGrasse Tyson on Twitter and looking at a few of his videos on YouTube, and I just kept hearing him make what I would say are academically lazy arguments. I know he's a PhD in astrophysics, and but he was always making comments, historical comments, and I'm also a historian as well. So he would make comments, and these aren't faith questions. These aren't, questions. Do you believe Jesus walked on water? It's not that type of question. He constantly makes these statements, as if the church was diametrically opposed to learning, when the church was one of the primary tools that was pushing learning, through the Renaissance and through the Enlightenment. So it just, at first I thought these were accidental statements. I said, okay, he's an educated man. I know he's obviously a doctor, a PhD, so he has to know PhDs in other disciplines. So maybe he's just maybe misinterpreting information. But that's when I realized that he was part of that new atheist movement, even though he'll say, no, I'm an agnostic. And this is the primary question. This is where the theodicy comes into question. The primary question that he presupposes, and he gives us what we call in propositional logic a derivation. All right, this is, you might remember this if most first year philosophy classes have this question. They give you three presuppositions. If God is all powerful, if God is all knowing, all right, and if God is all good, then the conclusion to that is evil shouldn't exist. Because if God is all powerful, he's able to do something about it. If he's all knowing, he knows that evil exists. All right. And if he's all good, he should want for there not to be evil. So therefore, evil should exist. And obviously, we look around the world and evil exists. We know that. So there's two sides of this argument. There's one where you're talking about things like natural disasters, like earthquakes and volcanoes and things like that. And then there's the other side of it when we're talking about things like, mass murderers like Stalin, the Holocaust and things of this nature, slavery. Why would these things exist if God has these three particular presuppositions? So, of course, in the logical derivation, if you have these three presuppositions and you have this conclusion, the conclusion that evil exists and these three presuppositions of God's characteristics, then you would say, okay, well then, how is this possible? It's illogical at that point. So you have to either remove one of the presuppositions. You have to say, hey, that evil doesn't exist, or which we know is obviously not true. Or you say, well, God is not all good, or God is not all powerful or all knowing. One of those three presuppositions isn't true about God, which therefore diminishes the God that we know in Christianity, probably the same in Judaism and Islam. Or this God just doesn't exist at all, which is a conclusion they come to since this evil exists. And it's a juvenile argument, and I'm like, okay, logically speaking, you're restricting those presuppositions so you can get the conclusion that you want. And therefore, it's just simply patently illogical fallacy. It is illogical. So therefore, the argument is mute. So that's what the book's about. We take that argument that many thinkers throughout history have put forward, and I just basically call it out to be the straw man argument it is. And then I talk a little bit more about, and don't get me wrong, the book is not to get someone to believe in God. That's your personal feelings. I don't ever believe that you should force your religious beliefs on someone else. So if you choose not to believe, that's fine. But it challenges the idea of the things that some atheists in the new atheist movement push forward about Christianity, about the belief in God, or about people who believe in God. So I kind of, take a defense in that particular aspect, and say, okay, well, and also I put the lie to the idea that atheist, and atheism somehow is indicative of rationality or logic when it isn't. A lot of atheism, from my observation, is predicated on emotion and irrationality. I've Atheists are angry at religion, angry at a particular God, not all gods, just the God of Christianity in most cases, because obviously these arguments are most often had in Western society. Unfortunately, a lot of people, and unfortunately, a lot of believers also do believe in a pop culture Jesus or a pop culture, Christian God, as opposed to what the Bible actually presents that God to be. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. I'm sorry I rambled, but
Well, that's
that's
fine.
pretty much it. Mm-hmm.
That's fine. There's a whole laundry list of things there that I could talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Early on, when you were speaking, you mentioned worship and how, and I've heard this argument from other people. I myself do not believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
And though I was an evangelical Christian for many years, and I left the faith when I was 46, I remained a deist until I was 57. And between
Mm-hmm.
46 and 57, I did a lot of research and reading and soul searching. So it did not come easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure outside of religion what sort of worship we're talking about. I suppose if you're a sports fan, you can worship your team or a rock band or if your favorite musician or I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. But what if you don't have that in you? Like I don't worship anything, I don't think. I do like Fender Telecasters, but but I don't worship them. What what
well,
what would you say to someone like me?
well, as far as worship and praise, those concepts biblically, all right, and regarding if we're talking about the God, the Christian Bible, you praise God for, things that he's done for you. Thank you, Lord, for, giving me this job, or thank you for letting me be able to buy this house. That's what praise is for. When you get to the worship part, worship is to um, give glory to God for who he is. If I believe that this God that I'm in a relationship with, that he created me, that he created the universe, that he created the worlds, um, that's something to say, wow, that's impressive.
What about your average atheist who perhaps was raised in a church and they know their Bible really, really well? Are they
Mhm.
misinterpreting it, or what do you think?
I'm going to say this. I make a distinction between new atheism and simply being an atheist. All right. Being an atheist, if a person researches a faith or multiple faiths and decides, hey, I just don't believe God exists, I can understand that, even though I may not agree with it. The problem with the new atheists is their atheism is evangelical, for lack of a better. So a person who's taking the time to research the Bible or the Quran or the Rig Vedas, whatever they choose, and they say, hey, you know what? I've read it. I just don't buy it. Every individual has their walk. And I believe that, there have been people that have had faith, that have fallen from the faith and come back to the faith. And I believe that, my God is, powerful and merciful. And I believe that people do eventually come to a revelation of him by the Spirit of God. And that's not necessarily a religious thing. That's more of an individual experience, a spiritual thing. And I have no problem accepting that I believe in a God that I believe by my, subjective experience, and that is how I've come to my faith,
Hmm.
and again, everybody's different, and I have come to find, though, oddly, I've met people who were evangelicals and who were Catholics, and they became atheists for various reasons,
Hmm.
you know, and normally the ones I meet are pretty, hey, I'm atheist. You're not? Okay, let's talk about something else. The problem I have with the new atheists is they're seeking of conversion. And to me, their irrational belief that if you eliminate all religious and faith in gods, that the world would be this paradise.
So, what do you think of Christian nationalism? It's being talked about a lot in the United States.
Okay, good question. That's going to probably be talked about a lot in my next book, which is on race, American society, and politics. I'll let you know when that one's finished. That's a little tougher, right? Christian nationalism. First of all, I have a problem with nationalism in any type. All right. Not the actual, it's nationalism is what now, I guess. Um, yeah, I don't have a problem with patriotism. I don't have a problem with people being proud of their country, and being proud of their nation. I do have a significant problem with this movement that they call Christian nationalism because I don't find it particularly Christian at all. I don't think that it lines up with the historical faith. I don't think this is something that Augustine or Ambrose or Polycarp or Apostle Paul would agree with, or particularly Jesus would agree with.
Mm.
Most importantly, he's the
Right.
most important authority of our faith. So I just don't see it reflecting Christ at all. You know, what I see it as, unfortunately, the modern political landscape that we have has been etched in it's just been very weird. I mean, after the civil rights movement, you had the birth of what I call the moral majority, and you had this weird Christianity that began to grow within aspects of the white working class population. That some were obviously angry that African Americans had arrived, and I believe the Republican Party poured gasoline on that particular fire. And as we go from the end of the civil rights movement to the Reagan era, that anger, and unfortunately, the liberals unfortunately help feed into that by blaming white men for every ill in the universe. And you see that on steroids right now on the woke left. That you can't even say that white guys got it bad in Appalachia without someone saying they have white privilege. And I think unfortunately that people began to cling to their idea of their faith since it was attacked in their mind. And it became, I know they call it Christian nationalism, but it seems to be more like white nationalism. And maybe that's just an easier way to get away with saying it, as opposed to outright saying it's white nationalism. But like I said, I find it, as a Christian, as a conservative biblical scholar, I do not find it particularly in line with any of Jesus's teachings. It's just politics. People want to throw Christianity in there when they want to push their politics to try to claim some type of moral high ground. And honestly, I just find it, again, antichrist.
Right.
Because I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat or if you're conservative or liberal. At the end of the day, if you call yourself a Christian, what should be the primary driver is Christianity as taught by Jesus. And that's very simple. It's not complicated.
No.
Jesus had two commandments, very simple ones: love God, love your neighbor. And if you do that, you're fine.
That was my favorite thing. Yeah.
I don't see a lot of love in Christian nationalism right now.
No, absolutely not. Mm-hmm. So where can people find your book?
Well, my book is available on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. Go on and buy it. Again, like I just want to end in saying, my objective is not to convert atheists to Christianity or theists or atheists to being theists of any type. It is simply a defense of those of us who choose to believe, and saying that we can believe and you can not believe, and we can still live in society together. And,
absolutely.
I mean, we should be past the point of stoning people, yes. And unfortunately, some places where they aren't, but in the United States, we pretty much, for the most part, are. And I think we should work towards even being a little bit more accepting of each other, regardless of our faith or lack of. And I think that is what the founders wanted. So.
Well, thank you very much for being on the show today, Richard.
Well, thank you for having me again.
And you
look forward to talk to you in the future. You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, that's our show for today. And if you like what I do here on Tell Me About Your Book, then hit the like button and subscribe. And don't forget to ring that bell for future notifications. And if you are a self-published author, I would really like to hear from you. Until such time, keep on writing and be kind to one another.